Guys, it's Debbie Potts, and I'm going to share with you a presentation I am working on again about metabolism testing, as I think it is really important to understand the why on most everything to figure out how we can improve the aging process and live our best life as we age. So we want to get to slideshow here, and I want to view, let's see, wrong button. So I'm going to share with you this presentation I've been working on, and I'm trying to get shorten it. So I've got really long versions and short versions, and this needs to get shorter, but I thought I'd give you the unedited version on metabolism testing because I'd like to understand myself, the mitochondria, how we can improve them. How can I improve AMPK versus mTOR pathways? There's a lot to dive into. And so I'll try to do mini videos. Let's see, I'll time this so I don't get too long so you can focus on what I'm talking about. Slides, I think for me, I like to, well, it reminds me of ski school when I taught kids how to ski powder pigs when I was in high school. Teach kids how to ski visually. You have to demo, you have to watch it on a video how to do something as this, and then we have to actually experience it. So for learning, I find I need to read, hear, and observe. So it's different learning styles to really soak it in. This is more my benefiting my own self. When I do PNOE metabolism testing, we're measuring your RMR, which is your resting metabolic rate. And then I'm doing your exercise metabolism test, which we call AMR, active metabolism test. I'm trying to get the information out there that you don't need to be an athlete to get this test done. We don't need to feel intimidated by calling it a VO2 max test. I really feel strongly to share that VO2 max testing is not really the only thing we're looking at. It's a peak VO2. And so I almost want to ignore that whole part of the test that so many major people in our industry promote VO2 max testing. Yes, it is the biggest, one of the biggest areas to improve on for longevity markers. Now, how many people are actually wanting to do a VO2 max test? And what do you even do with that information? So say your VO2 max is 43. How are you going to make it better next time? It's getting the information from the test to figure out all areas of your metabolism at rest and during exercise. So you have the tools combined with blood chemistry panel and ideally nutritional therapy assessment. So we have all the tools in our toolbox to figure out personalized program, nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress, movement, digestion, gut health, hydration, mineral balancing, gratitude, play, laughter. It's the holistic approach. So when we talk today specifically about what we get out of this report, this is why I don't want to just focus on the AMR test on your VO2 max, VO2 peak. So we get a report afterwards and I go through the results with people. Let's start with what is a PNOE or metabolic cart. There's other companies that do this. I hear Peter Attia's promoting the VO2 Master. I've talked to other people do CORE, KOR, and there's other tests that are expensive. They're more laboratory type of devices. This is PNOE's a portable testing kit. So maybe you go exercise physiology lab at a college, you might get a higher end that's all built in and you can't move it around, but this is a great option. Now, PNOE metabolic test assesses RMR, resting metabolic rate, using indirect calorimetry, analyzing with the mask on. We're analyzing oxygen in, so that's called volume of oxygen, so VO2. And when you're exhaling, that's your carbon dioxide production, VCO2, to determine metabolic efficiency, substrate utilization, and overall energy expenditure. RMR represents the number of calories your body burns at rest to maintain essential functions as breathing, circulation, and organ function. We'll go into this a little deeper, but PNOE RMR testing from that measurement with the face mask on, it's 15 minutes max, so 10 to 15 minutes. Your calorie expenditure at rest We'll talk about respiratory exchange ratio is a RER to determine your fat to carbohydrate oxidation, so what you're burning. And then metabolic efficiency, or is your metabolism fast, slow, or in between, optimal? Now, we also measure with a heart rate monitor strap on, a chest strap. We use a polar heart rate monitor strap, heart rate variability. And from that heart rate variability test, evaluation of your sympathetic to parasympathetic nervous system. So if you are more dominant in one side or the other, again, it's always a Goldilocks effect for everything. You want to have resiliency to be bouncing back and forth between these two different sides. As with the nervous system, we're measuring a low frequency and high frequency. Low frequency is sympathetic. Parasympathetic is your high frequency. So we can get that measurement with the heart rate strap on. And I've talked about that in other episodes with Rhonda Collier of Sweet Beat Life and other apps you can use to determine not just your heart rate variability, but measuring your nervous system balance. So check other videos on that. And then also we're looking at rest. And then of course, during exercise test, how well you are using oxygen when you're breathing in, and then your carbon dioxide production when you're exhaling. And that's at rest. So that's what we're looking at in a summary RMR testing. But there's so much more we're getting from the test. Now, when we're doing your exercise test, your active metabolism test, we're assessing how your calorie burns and uses fuel during movement. So we're looking at your VO2 max, fat versus carbohydrate, oxidation. So the new word instead of aerobic, anaerobic is going to be oxidative fat or carb oxidized. So you're burning that fuel in the mitochondria, need oxygen. So that will be determined at different intensities. And that's what we're looking at. The marker, we'll talk about metabolic flexibility. Are you able to burn fat and then go back to carbs and shift back and forth? Kind of measuring your lactate indirectly. I can do blood test in your finger to measure your lactate levels at rest based on what I listened to with Dr. Ben Bickman. Great information on the role of lactate. And if you are pre-diabetic, type 2 diabetes, it might be a good extra marker to look at. Is your lactate levels high even at rest? So if you're not using fat for fuel, that's another clue if that's elevated. We're also looking at ventilatory thresholds, VT1 and VT2, when we're doing the exercise test to determine your 5 training zones I'll go into. Energy expenditure at different intensities, help you optimize your training and fueling plan. So great for anyone just exercising, training for an event, if you're doing a race, and figure out your strategies for racing fueling wise. So you can use that data. We're also looking at post-exercise oxygen consumption, EPOC, and recovery efficiency. So you might have heard of EPOC when you're doing interval training. The benefits of post-exercise, your oxygen levels are higher. So we'll measure that. The PNOE test is 2.5 minutes, but I've been running it longer, kind of tweaking the set protocol, doing it more 5 minutes or however long it takes to see someone burn fat again. So I kind of change the protocol a little bit based on the person, which is, I think, is important to do because we're making the test based on where you are right now, getting that data and retesting and seeing our improvements. So with all this information, we can help customize your training, nutrition, and recovery strategies, as well as looking at how well your efficiency of burning the fuel source and using the nutrients for not just athletes. So really important point today is that this testing, I don't think should be just marketed to athletes. I think anyone trying to be their best self and perform their best in the future, we need to look at how we should exercise. How does your weekly, monthly plan look like? How is your nutrition and timing your nutrition and looking at all this together? So PNOE metabolism testing to me, when I'm working with people in person, obviously this is not a remote test, this is in person, that the data we collect is just part of the puzzle. So I still encourage my clients to do functional lab testing, as well as doing just a comprehensive blood chemistry panel. I've been sending people over to Function Health to get their blood work because it's super affordable for what you get. And it's a year-long package and you can pay monthly and you get retesting. It is the best deal. So I'm trying to get a discount code for people because you can get $100 off when you refer other people. So you can do it that way. So let's go into some definitions. All right. So mitochondria are really what we talk about to function our mitochondria optimal level. I just texted Casey Means. I've been trying to get her on the show because I know her book, Good Energy. I've listened to a lot of her interviews. It's all about looking at the mitochondria and our energy production. And it's just not mitochondria in our muscle cells, but that's what we're kind of more looking at when we're doing this exercise test. So some words we'll get in the test just to clear up what it all means. The word mitochondrial capacity is the number or the ability of the mitochondria to produce ATP. So the ability of the mitochondria to make energy. Mitochondria density is the number of mitochondria in a cell, right? So we want to get more mitochondria in a cell to be even healthier. Now, enzymes, enzymatic activity, the activity of enzymes involved in the electron transport chain. And then we have mitochondrial biogenesis, which you probably know what that is. This is a process of which new mitochondria are formed in the cell. And that's a key part that we're working on. How can we improve our mitochondria capacity? How can we create new mitochondria biogenesis? How does that work? And then mitochondria efficiency. How efficient are those mitochondria to convert energy, so fat and carbohydrates, into ATP? How efficient are they? So we'll be looking at that when we're doing your metabolism testing, when we analyze the data and get the report back. This is an important part of if you want to be fit and healthy from the inside out at a cellular level, these markers are really key to figuring out what you need to do. Where are you now? Get a test. Don't wait until you're in shape. You want to get a baseline because then you can even improve even more by knowing exactly what you should be working on. What are your areas of opportunity, right? Not just one size fits all approach. So even deeper, the metabolic efficiency term in PNOE testing is how your body uses oxygen and burns fat versus carbohydrates. A metabolically efficient person burns fat better at rest or at low intensity. And metabolic flexibility, you've heard the word a lot. And if you look at my videos I've done with a Lumen device day to day breath test, PNOE is measuring your ability to switch between fat and carbohydrates based on your activity level. A metabolically flexible person adapts quickly to using either fuel, either fat or carbohydrates, or maybe, looking at high end, you're able to switch to creatine phosphate is at the end, high end, zone 5, based on your intensity and need. On the left here, you can see one of the pages on the report we'll talk about is your biological age to your chronological age. And we can determine that. The report will give you a number based on your VO2 max or peak, your fat burn efficiency score, and your metabolic rate. So these are factors that impact, are you younger or older than your chronological age? And so you can see on each page of the report, it gives you lots of information on what they're measuring, how, and what it means, and what to do with it. We estimate your biological age based on your VO2 max, your fat burning efficiency, and your metabolic rate markers. According to AHA, your cardiorespiratory fitness is your VO2 max is the best predictor of how long and how well you live. But they also add in other factors as a high fat burning efficiency is equal to high cellular fitness. Remember, we want to be fit and healthy at a cellular level, and that's about the mitochondria. This is essential for preventing metabolic dysfunction and weight gain. And a high metabolic rate is crucial for long-term wellness as it is the most effective shield against weight gain and the number one driver behind most dangerous health-related issues, as Dr. Casey Means talks about in her book, Good Energy. So now metabolic health is the main player we talk about behind weight loss, energy, longevity, and metabolism. So metabolic health is the process which your body converts the food you consume into energy for immediate use or to be stored for later, as in fat or stored glycogen in your liver and muscles. Now, metabolic health refers to the optimal functioning of metabolic processes in the body, encompassing efficient energy production, energy utilization, and storage. It involves balancing your blood sugar, healthy lipid profiles, and hormone regulation. So if we have good metabolic health, this is crucial for overall well-being, disease prevention, and longevity. When we are doing the PNOE active test and the recovery after that test, as well as the resting metabolic rate, we can put all this information together as long as you give me a good nutritional therapy intake form and see what you've been doing now, then I can help create more detailed program for you. So tracking fat burn efficiency, why does it matter, is what I also want to include in this webinar. Tracking with something as PNOE, RMR, and then Lumen device day-to-day gives you actionable insights into your metabolic health and mitochondria function. So how well are your cells working to use fat as fuel and be able to move to carbohydrate oxidation when needed? By addressing your lifestyle habits, we'll talk about the holistic method, working on your stress and your sleep for sure, and movement throughout the day, improving your aerobic capacity can enhance your fat burning efficiency, supporting better health and longevity. I pause at the word aerobic capacity because I'm being trained to get rid of aerobic versus anaerobic. It's really different fuel uses. So say oxidative phosphorylation, that using fat for fuel, not depending on carbs as your main fuel. Now, why is fat burning efficiency so important? Again, going into this a little bit deeper, as I always like to understand the why and the mechanism of action. If we go into more deeper level, we're talking mitochondrial health, the efficiency of our mitochondria, looking at fat burning and energy production and cellular health, longevity, lots of connection between our mitochondrial health and metabolic flexibility and increased lifespan. And then improved fat oxidation enhances metabolic health, reduces the risk of obesity, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes. So major chronic disease prevention. And then high fat burning efficiency may lower systemic inflammation and improve overall resiliency. And we call it metabolic harmony, really getting all the body functions working together as one to create this metabolic harmony is key. So what impacts your fat burning efficiency? So one of the pages here on the report, on the exercise report, is fat burning efficiency and your mitochondria function. So we go into what it shows, why is it important to track, and how do you need to prove it? So this is when I personalize a program. Where are you needing to improve? What factors? What are your areas of opportunity? So to improve fat burning efficiency, we'll talk about, again, the word aerobic exercise I don't like, but saying, do you need consistent exercise that's using fat as your main fuel source? So basically zone 2 you hear about, but peak fat burning. So your peak fat max training around there, that will help increase mitochondria density. Remember, that means more mitochondria in the cell and more efficient ATP production, more mitochondria efficiencies, creating more energy, being more efficient at their job, right? Sleep is huge. What you eat is huge, and stress management. But sunlight exposure is really important. I see so many people in the morning have hats and sunglasses on. It's sunrise. You don't need to worry about getting a sunburn. So getting sunlight exposure in the morning and at evening, I think is an important part of circadian rhythm. And research on that, I'd love to dive into deeper on red light therapy and cellular function with sunlight. And then, of course, negative factors, what inhibits fat burning is your processed foods, the seed oils, alcohol, eating late at night, being sedentary. This all impacts your mitochondria and fat utilization. And this is where I think is important, is kind of why I shifted my years of personal training to be more of a holistic practitioner and becoming a nutritional therapy practitioner and FDN practitioner, and always learning that you can't out exercise poor lifestyle habits. You can't out exercise poor nutrition habits. You can't out supplement poor lifestyle habits. It is really a holistic approach, and you can't just try to exercise and get results, but it does help. But you still need to work on what you're eating, the alcohol consumption, eating late. I'm recording this in a hotel room. I'm at Expo West Natural Product Show, and I see people, they're out all day. And then at the conferences, I think a lot of people go out to eat late at night, and then they're out drinking after dinner, and then they go to bed and they have to get up early and work at a conference. And I don't understand that world. It doesn't work for me. I'd rather get my sleep and not eat late, not have alcohol, and that impacts my sleep and my workouts the next day. So it's really what you want to choose, what's important to you. So a little bit deeper, again, we can go into the mitochondria. Why does it matter? Looking at what happens, why do our mitochondria as we age get dysfunctional, genetic mutations, aging, increased oxidative stress, and that can reduce ATP production. So I want to just do a follow-up podcast on oxidative stress, chronic disease, nutrition, certain vitamins, minerals, B complex, CoQ10, magnesium. And I worry when I say the nutritional deficiencies, don't just go buy all these supplements and take them. We have to look at why are you not getting those? Are you not eating a nutrient dense diet? And then are you not digesting the food? And are you not absorbing them? So we need to work north, start how we're eating, when, why, what, of course, but are you chewing your food? Do you need digestive enzymes? Do you need HCl betaine? How's your bile flow? How's your liver, gallbladder function? How's your gut wall lining? Are you in an inflamed state? Do you have leaky gut? So there's so much more. And as well as we look at B minerals, are you having nutrition deficiency because you're not getting the nutrients into the cells? So there's a lot to that. So again, whenever we talk about supplements, don't go, oh, I need that. I need to buy this. I need to buy that. Let's look at what you need as an individual. Oops, my phone's on. So mitochondria dysfunction, again, reactive oxygen species is a big area to look at. So impaired cellular repair, that's all important. And then how we test your mitochondria function, we'll go into that. All right, so I'm not going to go into that more, but that just gives you an idea of the role of the mitochondria. Now, when we're doing your fitness testing, we are measuring your mitochondria function with the fuel sources. So aerobic is the oxidative phosphorylation. We're going to cross out that word. We're not aerobic or anaerobic. We're always doing a blend of fuels. And lactate metabolism isn't so much as when we're not having enough oxygen, it's more we're shifting to more non-oxidative. So we don't have as much oxygen, but you're still burning a little bit of fat, maybe more carbohydrates as intensity goes up. We'll see. And then you're producing more lactate. And then we'll see at the high end, you're burning more creatine phosphate and stored ATP for that 10-second sprint. Recovery, post-exercise oxygen consumptions. And if we have a slow recovery, I can see that you might have mitochondria inefficiency. If you're we reach your VO2 peak, we stop the test, now we're doing recovery for the third stage of the test. If I don't see you burning fat, your recovery is super slow, we're having to wait 10 minutes, 5 minutes or more, I think that's a big red flag. We need to do something to improve your mitochondria. Nutrition, lifestyle habits, your exercise, we need to look at that. Now, nervous system, we might see your mitochondria dysfunction if you're in a sympathetic state. If you are having too much chronic stress, that can impact your mitochondria function and put you in that fight or flight sympathetic dominance. So we need to track that. So that's how metabolism testing can help us. All right. So preventions, of course, nutrition, exercise, managing inflammation, antioxidants. I'm going to do a whole video, short video, ideally on glutathione and different markers in phase or ingredients of phase 1 and phase 2, liver detox pathways, and phase 3's drainage pathways. And then targeted therapies. Again, don't read something and take something because you read it. You make sure you're getting personalized. So next, finish up here in the reports. These are all the markers we're getting. Active test on the right, RMR, resting metabolism on the left. Identifying where your areas of opportunity are so we get you working at optimal level. We're doing a breath analysis, so we're getting a lot more than just your fat to carb burden. We're also analyzing breathing. So resting metabolism, RMR, total calories burned at rest, metabolically efficiency we're measuring is your metabolism fast or slow within optimal range compared to value based on age, sex, weight, and height. Your metabolic age is how your metabolism compares to your chronological age. We're looking at your fat to carb utilization. 0.7 is your primarily using fat. 0.85 is a mixed fuel source, and then 1.0 and higher. If this happens earlier, this is a good marker that your metabolic dysfunction, because this occurs early on if you're mostly burning carbs. Okay, so exercise tests and key metrics, again, peak VO2 and your volume of carbon dioxide, what you breathe out. We're measuring your nervous system, metabolic stress and recovery. We can help figure out your nutrition based on metabolism if you need to spend more time increasing metabolism with strength training and protein. If your mitochondria are slow, we might want to look at improving AMPK pathway versus mTOR. So we've got a lot of information. We just have to put it all together. That's what I do. Now I got to switch this. RMR, again, is that number? So on this report here, you'll get resting metabolic rate. It gives you kind of an estimate if you exercised based on, I think they're using your height, weight, but because this isn't an exercise test, this is your resting metabolic rate. So this is a guess of how many calories you burn in 30 minutes. Throughout the day, if you're moving, this is about your TDEE, how many calories you're burning moving around. And then you could have the thermic effects of food. Protein, for example, you're breaking down, you're burning more calories to digest. So you're looking at how many calories do you need at rest, the days you exercise. Bottom here, we're looking at fuel. Are you burning green is fat, and then carbohydrates are blue. So some people who are having poor mitochondrial function, there'll be more blue here, maybe 50-50. I want to see up here like 80-20. Now, that's how many calories you need with exercise, without, and your RMR. So just because your RMR, say, is 1346, that doesn't mean you need to eat that much. You have to look at, say, the days you don't work out, you're getting about 2,000 calories for this person. So we want to look at the whole picture. Now, Lumen is a great device to use day to day to get more information if you're on a mission to improve your metabolic health. So you do the breath test, and then it can tell you if you are needing to make any adjustments when you're eating the wrong foods, if you're not timing the foods around your exercise session, if you're working on body composition. So RER, what impacts it? So higher exercise intensity shifts you towards more carb burning. If you eat a high carb diet, that raises your RER. If you're more fat adapted, you may have a lower respiratory exchange ratios, RER. And then how you're trained. So we used to say that fat adapted, you'll burn more fat at higher intensities. So we're moving that metabolic efficiency point to the right. And if you have a low RER, you're burning better, utilized, you're better fat burner, a more efficient mitochondria. And if your RER is higher, you'll indicate metabolic inflexibility or mitochondrial dysfunction. So if you're metabolically inflexible, you don't shift back and forth. All right, so I went over that already. Okay, so VO2 max on the exercise report, and this is just more in depth if you want to understand how do they come up with this biological age. Every test is a little different. I know I've done some biological age tests based on a swab of my mouth of the saliva, and it can tell you your telomeres and looking at different measurements. So you have to remember, what is this measuring it based on? So it's looking at your VO2 max, fuel utilization, metabolic flexibility, energy efficiency. More efficient energy use correlates with younger biological age. A well-functioning cardiorespiratory system sign of younger biological age. We're also looking at the exercise test to figure out this biological age. All those. I already said that. So duplicate slide there again. I tend to do that. That's why I like to go through this with you first. So active metabolism test, we're getting all this information, and then we can look at PNOE test, your VO2 max. Do we need to improve it? That's zone 4 and 5. Do we need to look at your improving your metabolism, how many calories you're burning to manage your weight? Do we need more lean body mass? Look at your body fat percentage. Do we need to look at fat and carb burn at rest? If we need to adjust your macros, and maybe if you're hungry too much, we need to adjust your macros so you have more satiation, no cravings. And fat and carb burn during exercise, do we need to improve your fat burning? Maybe we need more zone 2. That enhances your cellular fitness and fat burn. And then we're looking at your breathing. How well you're breathing at rest and during exercise. Do you hyperventilate? Do you have too many breaths per minute and you're at low intensity? So we work on some breath work programs to do. So we're looking at fuel source. So this is a sample test. The gold down here is your fat fuel. The purple is carbohydrate usage. The heart rate is gradually increasing. And then we have this third part. So this first part's your warm up, and you can see they're mostly fat burning here. And then their metabolic crossover point is about through here where the fat comes up. So you can look at that heart rate, and you're seeing their last stage here, the warm down, and how they start to come back to burning fat. Now I would have had that go a little longer to see if I see more fat. All right, so funny, I have this infographic behind here. I was using ChatGPT to make this chart you'll see next, and it made this image when I wanted a graph, but I thought that was pretty cool. The words are all kind of messed up and you can't, they're not proper, not spelled properly, but it's kind of freaking amazing that ChatGPT can create a image based on what I was trying to do for your 5 zones. So in the PNOE exercise report, we're going to look at creating 5 zones. So I always, again, want to understand, how do you determine those zones? What are we looking at? How do we determine them for you based on your test where you are today? So here's what I had ChatGPT do. Zone 1 to zone 5. Zone 1 is your recovery zone. Your fuel mixture is primarily fat. So with some carbohydrates in there, so it's not really 100%. And then zone 2 is your peak fat burning, is your bottom of zone 2. Top of zone 2 is your metabolic crossover point. Zone 3, your carbs are being higher than the fat as we go. And then you can see this RER, respiratory exchange ratio. Zone 4, so zone 3 I call more tempo. And then zone 4 is more the high intensity interval training. And then zone 5 is more your sprint interval training. And we can look at your breathing frequency changes. So we can see here on the chart on the right, your zone 1's down here. You're changing the fuel source. Oxidative phosphorylation is the correct term of fatty acid beta oxidation, which means you're using fat, breaking down and creating lots of ATP. It just takes longer. That's why it's a zone 1, long sustained distance. You're not able to use fat up at these higher intensities because it takes too long. And then you want up here that instant fuel, is that sugar, the carbohydrates, glycolysis. Now, we look at too, what's the predominant fuel source? Triglycerides break down to free fatty acids. We've got fat and some small carbs. And so if you really want to look at the metabolic pathways, I was looking at oxidative phosphorylation, fat and some glucose. In zone 3, we're starting to shift to more glycolysis. And then again, lactate in is higher levels as you start to do more anaerobic glycolysis or non-oxidative, you can call it. And then up here, zone 5, now we're shifting to that creatine phosphate, which is why we need to supplement with creatine phosphate, especially for women. We have less stored creatine and harder to get, but for brain fuel and for muscle, because if you're doing sprint interval training and heavy lifting, guess what fuel source? I've said this many times, but you're using creatine up here. So this is your sprint interval training and your strength training, heavy lifting. So creatine 3 to 5 grams a day. I get mine from Keon each month. So always don't buy something without using a discount code. So ask me for code or use Coach Debbie Potts. So then we can figure out optimal training. How much time do you need based on right now? Let's reevaluate in a month or 3 months max is how much strength training a week, interval training, and cardio training. What does it look like? And there's an example, and we want to look at a holistic approach, getting everything in balance for you. And then the point of zone 2 is at peak fat max, and then sprint intervals for longevity. So how do you improve mitochondria health? Creating new mitochondria and sprint interval training helps as well. All right, so touch on that too much, but you're going to look at the fuel sources change, fat burning efficiency. You know, we're looking at this crossover point. And then the benefits of each zone, mitochondria function, and then how we create a plan based on the fuel source. So we're looking at all these markers, figure out what you need to do where you are now to create a customized plan. And then the goal for me is to avoid metabolism slowdown, figuring out what's best for your mitochondria, how should you exercise, fuel, and train. And again, how we can get this information from the test here, and then here, figure out your macros, your calories, your breath work from the resting metabolic test, and figure out what you need to do to be your best self in the future. Balance your training, what type of exercise you should do, and the sleep and stress management. And then boosting mitochondria, we're all doing fasting and keto, but then if you're talking to the sedentary population, that works to increase mitochondria. If you're talking to the active population, we are doing the high intensity interval training. So calorie restriction or fasting, thermic stress is heat stress, cold plunges, red light saunas. These are great ways to mitochondria, but too much of anything can be too much, right? So if I'm doing all of this, that can be chronic stress because you're doing these acute stressors. But if you keep adding more acute stressors, 10 different things each day, that's now chronic stressor and you're overloading the body. So it's not acute, hormetic, quick stress. You're doing too many different stressors. It doesn't work. And then again, don't go buy all these supplements. Let's look at what you are lacking and what we can do naturally first. So if you want to look at more of a holistic approach, test and not guess. So let me know if you have questions, creating metabolic harmony, so we can work on being your best self. So check this out. And that is all for today's show. Let me know your questions, and I hope you get some testing and reach out for more information. Head to debbiepotts.net or send me an email, Coach Debbie Potts on Instagram, or message here in the video.